Okay, question 30. The author elaborates on the idea that creating a full analysis of platypus DNA was an important scientific endeavor, mainly through. The author elaborates on the idea mainly through, or develops the idea by. This is a typical question. It's what we would call a rhetorical development question. They want us to say, what is the strategy? How is the author developing the core idea that it's asking about? It could be something like through dialogue, through personification, things like that, although some of them have separate question types themselves, as we know. So let's take a closer look. Let's see what the author is doing as he develops the idea that the DNA analysis is important for science. So the first part we see, it's more than a confirmation of a scientific oddity. So this is where we begin to introduce that it's scientifically important to look at the platypus genome. So why is this scientifically important? They provide a window into time in history when mammals became unique. It's important because of our own modern genomes, which are still a big mystery, because it allows us to be able to translate our genetic language into useful health knowledge. So it's useful to us. That's part of it. So what is this doing so far? It's telling us essentially what we can learn from the study of the genome of the platypus. Back in 12, it says they learned the platypus lost most of its genetic ability. The scientific value of pinning genetics to physiological function, so like milk production. So we learn the traits of the animal are closely linked to the genetics of the animal. In the case of the platypus, in this case, it represents 3 different types of genetics. More generally, though, studying how nature cuts and pastes modern genomes gives scientists an inside scoop on how changes relate to the health and disease risk. So basically, the author seems to be, from paragraph to paragraph, telling us what we learn from a study of the DNA of the platypus, how it helps science. So let's see if there's an answer choice that indicates that, because that seems to be how the author is developing the idea of the importance. So E, a description of the type of information about human genetics that specialized research can yield. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It's very abstract, so it might be a little difficult to understand, but it's telling us the types of things we can learn, basically what we learn from the DNA. Well, we can learn about disease. We can learn about the traits or physiology of the animals. We can learn about the history of evolution. These are all the types of information we learn that the author talks about. And specialized research, well, that's the comparative genomics, right, that they discuss in a full section of the passage. So that looks pretty good. F, a comparison of the platypus with its closest bird and reptile relatives. No, there's nothing in there saying the platypus DNA is important because it's compared closely or to the closest bird and reptile. That comparison is simply not relevant or made there at all. It's not in this passage, so it doesn't answer the question. F is incorrect. G, the discussion of how unusual the platypus genome is in the animal kingdom. Well, unusual, the genome. It is unusual if we interpret that to mean it has 3 different types of genomes in there, and that's in general compared to other animals. That was an important idea the author used. Didn't seem to be how exactly he indicated the importance of the genome, but it was definitely a common theme throughout the passage, that 3 types of DNA make up the platypus, which is why it's unique and of interest to scientists. So is this what the answer is really reflecting, how unusual the platypus genome is? Let's keep going. H, the explanation of how genetics can be aligned to physiological function. Well, we saw that, right? That was in one of the last part, but this is too narrow. This is part of the answer, not the full answer of the full analysis of platypus DNA. This is just one of those things we learned from DNA analysis. So that's not right. E would be a much better answer. The types of information we'll learn, which had several different examples. So which would be right between E and G? The discussion of how unusual the platypus genome is in the animal kingdom? Well, is the value to science the fact that it's unusual? No, the value is that it allows us to do that DNA analysis. So I don't think this is quite the right idea, right? And it talks about the animal kingdom, whereas E mentions human genetics. Remember, a lot of these benefits of the study of the DNA of the platypus was for human disease, to learn more about it. So E picks up on that idea. I think that's the correct answer for number 30. These are the types of things, what we can learn from DNA analysis. The author highlights that in several of the paragraphs throughout.